Justin Trudeau, Nicolas Sarkozy, Tony Blair, Bill Gates, Angela Merkel, what do they all have in common? It ain't good news. That's what we're going to be talking about in this video.
Thank you again. Please like, comment, subscribe, and give us a thumbs up. And you'll find all the links for the guests in the description below.
Hey, Johnny, thank you so much for making yourself available. It is Wednesday, the 4th of February at 25 p.m. UK time, 25 past 9. I should say what it's past, right? It's 25 past something in the evening in the UK. And I'm joined by investigative journalist par excellence, Johnny Vedmore. We've done a video about Nicola Junkerman and the Epstein files, and about how you are in the Epstein files as a journalist of concern. We've also done a video about fifth generation warfare, which is what is being used to wage war against us and destroy our communities and our livelihoods. And here we're going to be talking about what is it that is common with the people that I mentioned, plus many, many more. Who are other names that came through that first cohort?
No, it was a lot. It was called originally it was called the World Economic Forum's Global Leaders for Tomorrow, and was rebranded later the Young Global Leaders, or the Forum for Young Global Leaders. But the first round, 1993, well, that was Bill Gates, Nicolas Sarkozy, Angela Merkel, Tony Blair. I think Larry Summers is in there. You got Richard Branson. You got Viktor Orban is in there. He's a surprise for a lot of people. He's not only that weirdly connected elite organization training program that Viktor Orban went through either. He went through the German Marshall Fund's Memorial Marshall Fund prize as well, so he's a scholar in many different ways. But the Young Global Leaders program is really an interesting thing to look at, because it's how, first of all, they train potential leaders of the future, and these potential leaders of the future tend to become the leaders of the future, probably because they've got this on their CV. And when I first looked into it, I had entered into it from a different view. I had been researching Klaus Schwab, and I had written an article for Unlimited Hangout with Whitney Webb. I'd written an article. It was one of my seminal pieces, my first really big major solo pieces that really hit home, was Schwab family values, and went back into the Whitney Webb was like, take 6 weeks, go find out as much you can about Klaus Schwab, and then write see if there's anything about his father or his mother, and see what you can find. And so I found his father. It all been rumor and conjecture, and many people who were saying his father was some Nazi general, and it was just false. It was a completely different family. The word Schwab is actually Schwabia. It comes from Oberschwabia, which is a part of Germany. So they're people of Schwabia. They're Schwabs, and so there's a lot of people who were Jewish, who, when Jews were not allowed to live in the area, changed their name to the regions. So there's a lot of people who also, they just called themselves Schwab, so that they could avoid racism or avoid any type of insurgents. And there was a lot of it there was blood libels in that area. So I had already been investigating Schwab, and then I investigated his rise. I discovered his father had worked for a Nazi model company that had been working central to the atomic bomb program, and his father had run the Escher Weiss factory in Ravensburg in Germany, and then
didn't that factory provide armaments or work for the Nazis or something?
Yeah, it didn't only do that. It was actually it made casings for the potential nuclear bombs. It made fighter parts for the fighter planes. It made parts for missiles generally. It made U-boat submarine parts, but it also made large turbines for enriching uranium. And that was what was central behind it. And because his father had worked on the nuclear bomb program, or the atomic bomb program for the Nazis. After the war, they got denazification, and a lot of intelligence and a lot of Americans came in and basically recruited these guys one by one, or co-opted them one by one. And by 1965, Eugene Schwab, that's Klaus Schwab's father, was telling Klaus Schwab that he needed to go to America to a certain thing called Kissinger's International Seminar, to learn at Harvard at the center of power, really. Now, this Kissinger's International Seminar, then I went into studying Kissinger's International Seminar and Schwab's time at it. And Kissinger's International Seminar was the precursor to the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader program. The CIA had realized that they wanted to do coups in countries, but they realized also they needed leaders to implant into those countries afterwards. And so by 1947, you had the CIA created. 1952, they do their first coup in Egypt. 1953, they're doing their second coup in Iran, overthrowing Mohammad Mossadegh. And their first, the first one, they installed Nasser in, who's part of the free officers movement, and within a few years he's already going to get help from the Soviets. It's the opposite than what they wanted. They wanted to oust the Soviets from the Middle East, and it was going to be a cat and mouse battle during the Cold War to make sure that they were the dominant power and that their allies were in power. So they had put in Nasser, and before long Nasser had turned over to the other side because the Americans weren't very trustworthy and weren't very nice and broke all of their promises all of the time. And so they worked out that they needed something, and they started in 1950, 1951, a guy called William Yandell Elliott, who was he's a very significant advisor to 6 presidents, very significant thinker as well, part of the Boys Club. He is a mentor of Henry Kissinger, young Henry Kissinger, and Henry Kissinger was convinced by William Yandell Elliott to create this seminar. Kissinger, in letters to Elliott, claimed that it should be called Yandell Elliott's International Seminar rather than Kissinger's. And what the idea was to have, I think it was 3 or 4 parts. The people would come over and give speeches and hear speeches. So they'd have a young elite that's chosen from loads of different countries around the world. You have to be the top performer, you have to be the most elite student, and you get chosen. If you get chosen, you get brought over, everything will be paid for, and basically is to indoctrinate you before the Soviets indoctrinate you. Because the Soviets, they had these programs going since 1917, 1918. Willy Munzenberg and people like that were proactively creating things like Comintern, which was about training young global leaders. And the West only started doing this post-World War II, so 1945. So they put a lot of effort into this. We know that there was Rockefeller money going into it because the Confluence, the magazine, was ran alongside Kissinger's International Seminar, was actually funded by Rockefellers. We also know that from 1960 to 1967, so including the time Klaus Schwab went to Kissinger's International Seminar, and Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau's father, which is very intriguing, and a few other world leaders, Valéry Destaing, the French Prime Minister, an Israeli president or prime minister, a Japanese prime minister, for the future, not at the time, but in the future. They all went through Kissinger's International Seminar, along with a fair few other people. We know from 1960 to 1966, the Kissinger's International Seminar was funded by the Fairfield Foundation, which was the CIA cutout, the Asia Foundation, which was the CIA cutout, and American Friends of the Middle East, which wasn't only a CIA cutout, it was headed up by Kermit Roosevelt, who was the person person who masterminded the first two coups in Egypt and Iran. So, I mean, they're significant CIA players, really. The American Friends of the Middle East was full of people like Virginia Gildersleeves and others who were just, they were so CIA, and they were different CIA. They were an anti-Zionist CIA. It was a very strange one. They believed in Palestine and keeping Palestine, and they were eventually defeated in about 1967. 1967 is this big reset that happens in the world. Six-Day War happens. You have the American public no longer have anti-Zionist tendencies en masse. They are now amenable to the idea of Israel having power in their own land, and they see the Arabs as breaking somehow some form of peace. The land increases exponentially, and the Zionist idea of by people like Nahum Goldman and others, and Nahum Goldman, who was one of the major Zionists who helped create Israel in the first place, his son was Guido Goldman, who was Henry Kissinger's best friend and flatmate during this period. So they're very close. There's a lot of friends of Zionists hanging around, and they say, right, we got to make, Nahum Goldman said this, we got to make Israel the center of military strategic power in the world, because then America has access to Asia, Russia, Europe, Africa, the Middle East as a springboard, as a platform from Israel. So Israel, I tend to describe it at this point, Israel becomes America's 51st state. And like I say, they go through a course. So 60 to 66, we know these three different CIA cutouts of funding Kissinger's international seminar. So Klaus Schwab is going through CIA-funded program. His journey there is provided by the Rotary Club Foundation. He actually gets there, and he then travels across America to UC Berkeley, with the center of the American nuclear program is at UC Berkeley, and he travels there and he stays there for 6 weeks and works with the main scientists on the main nuclear program. And then he goes back with Herman Kahn and John Kenneth Galbraith, who were given to him through Kissinger's international seminar, to set up the World Economic Forum, which eventually is set up in 1971. And it wouldn't be till 1993 that they get to where they really want to go. They had started planning this properly in 1950 and trying it out, but it wasn't until 1993 where they really started to say, okay, now we can do it. We've got the infrastructure. The Soviets have been beaten. The wall has fallen. It's going to be now we can implant into all of these different countries our own leaders through color revolutions. And color revolutions, which was a neoconservative way to cause revolutions in countries by using non-governmental organizations that were run by non-governmental development organizations and organizations like USAID and Soros's organizations, etc. One by one, as these countries fall, you've got World Economic Forum, young global leaders going into different countries. In actual fact, if you look at how it worked, 1993, that first one, Tony Blair and Gordon Brown are there. In 4 years, they'll be in power in Britain. It'll be a few years before Angela Merkel's in power, a few years before Orban's in power. It'll be a few years before Sarkozy's in power. It's almost, there's another alternative program as well, that's a Russian Patriot program that's also run by the World Economic Forum. There's only 3 people involved in that, and one of them is Vladimir Putin. And in 1999, of course, Boris Yeltsin says that guy's in charge. So, I mean, these programs you would believe they tend to choose people. Now, the Global Leaders for Tomorrow program lasted from 1993 till this is very interesting, this part. I think it was 2004. The Dan David Foundation gave Klaus Schwab a prize, $1 million, They gave Klaus Schwab $1 million, the Dan David Scholarship Prize, Foundation Scholarship Prize, I think it's called. And they said, you can spend it on whatever you like. Now, you'd think he would have spent it on cream tarts and parties for his friends, and maybe a yachting holiday or something like this, or some head rub, lube, whatever, however you like to say. But no, he actually said, oh, no, I'm going to reform the global leaders for tomorrow into the young global leaders, a form for young global. So that was funded. The start of the young global leaders was funded by the Dan David Foundation, and on the board.
What's the deal about the Dan David Foundation?
On the board of the Dan David Foundation at this time is Henry Kissinger, who originally created Kissinger's International Seminar and ends up funding. I wrote an article called The Kissinger Continuum, the unauthorized history of the World Economic Forum's Young Global Leader program. And it's that round in a circle, and there you go, Kissinger's back again, an old Kissinger, big and fat, sitting in a chair, enjoying his life with his extremely tall, weird wife. And he's the one who's on the board that's giving $1 million to Klaus Schwab so he can create this forum for young global leaders, which is, again, just a manifestation of the intelligence leadership program that keeps intelligence agents in power and intelligence in power. Yes. If you actually go through the people who are involved in young global leaders year by year, it's astounding. They've got nefarious histories, every single one of them. Like I remember in 2021, 2022, I was looking for a couple of people, and it was like, oh, they were heavily involved in all of the banking crisis stuff. Oh, actually, when you look at it, it looks like they might have actually caused certain parts of it, and you realize that they put the guiltiest people into power, so you can actually find articles and stories by following these people, because anybody that these people, the mark of the beast, the World Economic Forum gives a young global leader, you know that person's going to have done really bad stuff for the deep state in the past.
Yes, and they'll do that in the future, as Tony Blair, for example, did, and Bill Gates did and is doing. Okay, Johnny, you are, for people watching this, right, you are a person of concern, a journalist of concern in the Epstein files. So you must have been in the Global Leaders Program yourself, right? So when you arrive there, with all expenses paid, first class, 5-star hotel, right? And then they start training you. What did they do to you, Johnny?
They put things in me butt. No. I have to say one thing. J.K. Rowling is young global leader. Work that one out. Imagine you wanted to control both sides of a debate. Imagine you wanted to control one side and you wanted to control the other side. And then suddenly you train both of them, and then they leave, and one goes, I'm completely the opposite. Viktor Orban, he's completely the opposite, is he? Is he completely the opposite? Or created antithesis?
Okay, J.K. Rowling, I didn't know that. Was that before she published her books?
2003, 2004? After.
Can't remember.
After.
Okay.
1996, 1997, Harry Potter comes out.
Oh,
they've already got about 2 movies by that point, I'm sure.
Okay,
3 movies maybe.
Because otherwise, that's really, really spooky and worrying, right? I mean, it was.
I know it causes concern, doesn't it? I'm a journalist. I'm concerned.
Yeah, I'm going to verify, because you're a journalist of concern, right? When was Harry Potter first published?
I reckon 1998,
1997, yeah.
Yeah, I do quiz nights, so I'm good at this sort of stuff.
Okay, so when was she in the Young Global?
I think it's 2003, 2004. I mean, you can check it up. You could,
because what I was thinking was that she was in the Global Leaders Program, and then the Harry Potter books came out. I'm a bit reassured.
You're a bit reassured that she only sold out after she become rich.
No, that the stories are good. They're untainted by Kissinger and
Well,
Schwab.
half
Right?
of them. Half of them. Remember, they get darker as you go
They
along.
do get
They
darker.
do get darker, don't they? And the more
That's
she
right. A
gets
bit like this
involved with the
conversation,
global
Johnny,
elite.
when you bring in J.K. Rowling as a dark character.
It
But just
gets
sorry, Johnny.
uncomfortable.
The thing about the controlled opposition, could it not also be that J.K. Rowling goes in, Viktor Orban goes in, Vladimir Putin goes in, right? And then at some point they have this epiphany and say, look, this is not for me. And that they authentically set themselves up in opposition
Uh-huh.
because they're like, I'm not doing that no more.
Oh man, this sounds like a fairy tale.
No,
I
but that's
want this
possible for
world.
you.
I want to live in your world where that happens,
Well,
really, and you can give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and it turns out they are innocent in the end.
Well-
Because the world I live in, it turns the opposite tends to happen in my. I have in the past lived in that world. I really have, and I like to give people the benefit of the doubt, but then I've had some real harsh wake up calls, and I've also do a lot of research, and like even like with the Epstein case, when I'm researching people like Youngkerman and other people, I'm thinking to myself, they're probably not as bad as I'm making it out in my head. And then you see the emails and you realize they're actually worse.
Yeah.
And what you've done is you keep giving benefit of the doubt to bad people. They keep you keep missing the point.
Okay.
And that's
I can get that about Nicole Junkerman. We did a whole video, and people should go and watch that and go and check out newspace.com, where Johnny's done a lot of work about her and what she represents. But say if Vladimir Putin, there's so much that he's doing that's antithetical to the globalist plans. George Soros said a few years ago that if we lose Ukraine, we've lost. He's closed the borders. He's fought Christianity.
I think that's balls. I don't think he's really for Christianity. I think that he's creating the Sberbank app to be exactly the same as X is being created, which is exactly the same as other everything apps that are being created, like the WeChat, is it, or the app in China. He's making the Sberbank app to be a technocratic solution. They offer a Russian technocratic alternative to the technocracy, but it's exactly the same as the technocracy. It's just got a Russian hat on. That's all it is. All of the alternatives that you offer is just a Russian brand of neoconservatism with a lot of hyper normalization dolloped on top. And in the fifth generation warfare world, I think once the Russians get involved, then everything will go really wild and mad all of the time. We'll be crapping ourselves.
Okay, they may be doing that because they're a ruthless leader and that, people in power want to have more power and accountability, right? But human society is full of division, full of disagreement. It's not necessarily bad division or whatever, right? But if I think about my family, my extended family, there are some people that are like this and they agree with this, and some people are like that and they agree with that, and some people hold this position and some people hold that. I mean, just organizing a bloody holiday, say with 20 of my cousins, is a bloody nightmare. And yet it seems to me that what you're saying is all these people went into the Global Leaders Program and now they're pretty much doing what they were trained to do that serves the interests of the Great Reset. And I'm saying, wait a minute, humans are way more diverse, or have I misunderstood you?
They don't. They're not doing what they've trained to be doing. It's not training. They're not being trained. They're being told. That's the future. The future is the everything app. The future is RNA technology. The future is mega cities. The future is advanced partnership. The future is stakeholder capitalism. The future is you don't get a say over. You're not being trained on it. You're being told that's the way it is, and you're going to go back. And if you even did think you go against that world in any way, shape, or form, you're not going to make any money. Your country's going to collapse by itself, and all of the different things because the infrastructure has been made made for just that. So they're being told what the future looks like. They're not being trained in some sort of mechanism for, they go away and create their own version of what gets them to that point that the future looks like that they've been told. So I think the world, what you're mistaken is that the Young Global Leaders program, the Young Global Leaders are being trained outside society to take forward what they know it's going to be like, and the people who get chosen accept that the globalists and the think tanks are right. So when they go in there, they're not being like manipulated and trained into thinking that way. They've already been chosen to be those people that are completely with it. Now, that includes the fact that some are going to go back to their country, and their country's repulsed by an idea of a European style this, or a stakeholder capitalism this, or a Western ideal over here. The Russians and the Hungarians don't like it, so they have to manage it in a different way. But they're still managing it, and they're still being told where the gold is at the end of the rainbow, because they're being told where the gold is. Anywhere else leads to no gold. They go to these courses, they learn about how to make the gold. And so they go, and what you're going to do, go home and not make the gold? And you tell whatever you're going to tell to the people. And it's always going to be a fairy tale. It's always going to be a story that says you're working for their best interest, and don't worry about it. Don't think about it too much. And we want to think the best in people, but these are elite politicians, and we should know better by now. They're not the ones who are telling us the truth. They're not the ones who are after our best interest. They're not the ones who are building a society that's fit for us. It's fit for us to work for them. There's always that at the end of it, that we're supposed to be in service, in servitude, paying some form of tax so they can have their wars, they can have their games, they can have all of their luxury, and we pay for it all. And the system is created to move wealth towards them. That's the system we're in. That's the unfair system. Got to reject it at some point.
But are you saying there's no one in leadership who's like opposed to this?
No.
Like, I'm not doing this,
No.
playing this game. Trump,
No.
Rory.
No.
Or
He
even the
said
dissidents
Trump's well
like
in.
Bridget.
Trump is like the perfect example of the intelligence already being in charge. I mean, we're seeing fifth generation warfare being rolled out by an intelligence infrastructure that knows Trump can just be there up front as a meme while they are distracting the hell out of people. The same with Joe Biden. What do you think? You think Joe Biden was actually there in his mind? You think that Trump had any say over the pandemic stuff? He was just riding behind. Everything else is being chosen for him. The establishment chooses, and they just when we come to a crisis, when we come to a point, even in our own lives, we get given two options. And one's the only option that you can take that makes sense, and the other option's bad. So that's how we go on through life. That's how we work politics. That's how we work society. So that's the same for the leaders all around the world. They're going to go home and they're going to have to incorporate this technology, these solutions, these ideologies within their framework, within their own country, and they know that's the only way that that they will stay in power, and they will be allowed to stay in power, and they play ball, because honestly, once you're in luxury, you don't not play ball. Once these guys who have been chosen because morally or ethically they'll sway to luxury and to power, they got power and they got luxury. So what incentive have they got to actually do what's right for the people? And the evidence we've got is that Russia isn't worse off under Putin. He's done quite a lot of good stuff, you could say, but a lot of the stuff looks like psychological warfare. He's had to use a lot of psychological warfare to stay in power. I really, suggest that people go and look at Adam Curtis's hypernormalization, and there's parts about the guy who designed the psychological operations of people like Putin, which makes you make sense of how the world does look. You know, these people have to stay in power in their own countries by doing a load of different things, and Putin is coming up to the end now. There's a different generation, a different era about to happen. So these things are people of the past, new generations already been trained. They've already gone through, they've already been told how society's going to go. They acquiesce because they've been chosen to be the people who will acquiesce. And some of them will have to go home and have awkward conversations or just outright lie to their own people to remain in power. And they've been chosen to be the people who have psychologically lean to that.
Bloody hell.
Sorry. It sounds uncomfortable because it is.
Yeah,
And
it's bleak.
that's
It's
why we
really
want to
bleak.
reject uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, I noticed that tendency. It looks bleak. And then I'm thinking, well, what about Ibrahim Traore, what he's doing in Burkina Faso? And what about dissidents like Galloway and Corbyn and Andrew Bridgen?
Burkina Faso. The last time Burkina Faso changed global politics. Well, I'm not sure. I just don't know when that happened.
Ibrahim Traore going to take over the world, and then you'll be sorry, Johnny. Then you'll get.
Yeah, I know. I'm realizing now that when the Burkina Faso tyranny is upon us, that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for my. And listen, I'm not saying that people aren't positive. I'm saying something else as well. The whole of the technocracy, the whole of the design, the entropy that I've talked about so much that's built in to these designs of society, to these designs of ideology, things do not last forever. They know that things do not last forever. And it's the same with political systems. It's the same with the idea of democracy, voting, and all of this. They've already decided that's not the way. They're already, young global leaders, an expression of them and their dictatorship, where they just put the people who work for them in charge, and we vote for either that guy who works for them or that guy who works for them. So it's come down to a really base form of democracy that isn't really democracy. We know it. This is, this entropy built into political systems, and I don't think that we'll accept this. I don't think people will accept it. I think people will find other solutions on the ground within communities that will end up meaning that it makes their ideas of the future, like these young global leaders and what they get taught in these places and the slides that they try and manifest into reality and the mega cities they try and create. Well, all of this entropy is built into it all. Yeah. It will rise, it will fall. Something new will take over. They will incorporate a load of things, and some clever, savvy person sitting in a cafe or a bar somewhere will come up with a way to subvert it, and the whole thing will change and go around in a big circle, and everything will be reformed into whatever it's going to be. Evolution, the evolution of ideology. Again, that's the same for technocracy. That's the same for stakeholder capitalism, tokenization, everything that's to come, everything that has been. It's all of it. It changes. We go where the flow takes us, baby.
Johnny, you are so fabulous. You are so fabulous. So great to talk to. Newspace.com. And what people should do is to flow over to newspace.com and to your YouTube channel. And on the way, they should subscribe, comment, like, and let us know where they're flowing. And how can Burkina Faso take over the world? Let me know about that. And this is Johnny and Rich signing out. All the best. Bye-bye.